whose name, by the way, is Lennox.
So I'm Gareth A Davies, and I'm joined from across the pond with my good pal. We've known each other over 20 years. It's the one and only Dan Rafael. Dan, very first of all, how are you doing in lockdown, first of all?
I'm doing fine. I mean, it's, you're in your house. I'm with my wife and son who have made the decision to go and run an errand where they just have to drop something off, not going to be in contact with anybody, but at least get a chance to take a ride in the car for a little bit. But we're doing fine, It could be a lot worse. We're in a lot better situation than a lot of people. We're healthy. I hope you're good. You're looking good. Hopefully all our boxing friends and family are good also.
Me too. Yes, I am. I'm in day 36 of lockdown in isolation at home.
43.
Oh, day 43. Wow. I know. It's kind of mind-boggling. Obviously you've had some news with ESPN. You're not with them anymore, but you were a brilliant. I think you're the hardest working man in our business, frankly.
Thank you.
And I respect you for that. Oh yeah, 5 years USA Today, 15 years with ESPN, and you're at the very top of the tree and relentless. Your capacity.
And I look forward to the next chapter. I mean, I'm not going anywhere. I just may have a new. I might have a new home, but not going anywhere. I plan to be around boxing a long time.
Well, you and I can have a bit of fun from each side of the pond during this lockdown. There's no events going on, of course, the kind of lifeblood of what we do, but there's a lot happening because people are preparing for when we first come back. There will be a few questions popping in because you put out on Twitter, and I did, that we're having these chats like a daily news round, if you like.
Yeah.
25, 30-minute chat every day. This is our first one. Let's see how people enjoy it. I'm going to drop it on my YouTube. You'll put the link on yours. I'll put the link on my Twitter. We'll use social media like everyone's doing at the moment. Let me ask you, first of all, this is a big question. What's your instinct about when we're going to be back at events?
Well, that's a good question. That's obviously the question that everybody is interested in. When are we going to have not just boxing, but sports? So in terms of boxing, I think there's two ways to look at it. One, when will be the events that perhaps will take place with closed doors? In other words, just the people that are necessary to do the event, not necessarily spectators and ticket buying public. That I think can happen sooner than later. I would say, just to use one example, where I live in Virginia, the governor ordered stay at home until June 10th.
Wow.
And that's been the case, into June, or at least through the end of May in a lot of places. But I would say that maybe sometime shortly thereafter, within a month or so after that, maybe we could start seeing some closed door events. Because remember, Gareth, this is important. People need to know that once you're allowed to do it, it's not like there's going to be a boxing event the next day. Fighters need a few weeks minimum to, be fair to train and, promote to get their fights organized and all that. And, so I think closed door fights maybe by midsummer, with the spectators, boy, I don't know, because, the news, they say this is going to come back in some way in the fall also, and it's going to perhaps even be worse. So, you just have to listen to what the experts say. I think we're looking, though, minimum of the mid to late summer for any events. And I think, frankly, before there's big crowds, much longer, unfortunately.
Yeah, and down to everyone being tested, probably. Them being tested, sure. Us needing to know we're clean of COVID-19. It's going to be a complex process, isn't it?
And it's not just a process in boxing or MMA. It's the same thing that every sports league is facing. The NBA is trying to figure out a way to resume its season in terms of their playoffs. It's going to be the same case for the NHL. Major League Baseball is not happening presently because of what's going on. They're trying to formulate a way to save semblance of a season. You have what will come soon enough, which will be the beginning of the training camps for American football and our college football. So there's a lot of other sports activities that are looking to figure out a way to handle this besides just boxing. I think that the crack may come, though, whenever that first sport comes back. If the NBA figures out a way to do it, you'll see other leagues and other sports businesses figure out a way to sort of follow what they're doing, or whoever is first back in doing events.
Completely agree. I mean, speaking to Barry Hearn the other day, they're doing darts at home, it's called,
Right.
And that may well be a precursor to how they're planning to do boxing behind closed doors. But I reckon
you can do darts to one person, right? Throwing in a dart.
No, exactly.
You don't need judges and referees and medical personnel and an opponent. So, that's actually makes sense because, I know they want to have the crowd and the enthusiasm that when they have those tournaments. But it's better than nothing. You know, I watched last night on television the National Football League draft, which is usually in front of a huge crowd, fans cheering, all the players are there, and the team personnel doing interviews, and you know, it's a big raucous celebration of the new group of incoming professional football players. Last night they did it remotely from Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner's basement, you know, where they went to a million different places around where they had cameras with the prospects in their homes with their families, and them doing interviews like we're doing one now via Zoom or Skype or whatever. It's a whole new world, Gareth.
It really is. Well, look, let's dive into a couple of issues of the day. Devin Haney, I'll never lose to a white boy. And a couple of days later, I want your opinion about that. I think it's wrong,
Sure.
but we've heard it before. Alan Minter against Marvelous Marvin Hagler back in 1980. I'll never lose to a black guy. Wrong, of course. Joe Calzaghe, Bernard Hopkins lost. Sunday was the 12th anniversary. I did an interview with Joe about the Bernard Hopkins fight. We were both there in the media room that day when the fight was made. It was at Ricky Hatton, Floyd Mayweather in the December of 2007. I'll never lose to a white boy. Devin probably doesn't know the history there, but it was wrong of him to do so. But he's been reinstated, hasn't he, as WBC lightweight champion by Mauricio. What's your take on those two things?
Couple of things. I mean, I remember the Bernard Hopkins thing obviously very, very vividly. I don't think, like you mentioned, Devin was just a kid back then, a baby. He's only 21 years old, so if that was 12 years ago, he was just, he wasn't doing those things, I wouldn't think. Look, it was wrong of him to say, to the young man's credit, and I've known Devin for a while. He's a mature guy. He's a nice guy. He's a charitable guy. He's likable. And unfortunately, this has given some of the public the wrong idea about what's in his heart, I think. So I'm giving him a pass on this because I think I'm not saying I'm best friends with the kid or anything like that, but I feel like I know well enough to know that I don't think that he really meant it the way that it sounded. And to his credit, he did come out and make an apology that I felt was legitimate, that was from the heart, that was real. So I just will say this: he's a 21-year-old kid. People have to still remember that I'm not giving you a pass or making an excuse. I'm saying, think back when you were 21. We all did a lot of stupid things and said a lot of dopey things that we wish we probably could take back. So I think he understands it was not the right thing to say, and he made an apology, and I'm going to leave it at that, and let's just move on and see how his actions are going to be bigger than his words. As far as what happened with the WBC, they're not related in terms of the comment and what happened with Mauricio. My feeling was that's what should have been the case in the first place. That if he was injured with the shoulder from his last fight, you say, okay, you're injured, you can't fight, so you can't do your mandatory, and that's when an interim title should be used. Not the cockamamie way that most organizations do. So let Javier Fortuna and Luke Campbell, both good contenders, fight for that title while he's sidelined. And then the winner of that fight is ordered to fight Devin when he is healthy and able to come back. Ultimately, that is what happened. They were going to fight for the vacant title. He applied for the reinstatement. He is apparently healthy and was going to be coming back this summer had things been on a normal schedule. Fortuna and Campbell will fight for the interim title when they can do so. And then the winner would be fighting against Devin Haney, who was allowed to take an interim voluntary fight. Now, I would say that by the time any of that stuff happens, if Devin does have that interim fight when he comes back, he may by that time be out of the weight class and up at 140, and the winner of a Fortuna Campbell will become the WBC champion anyway. But I think it worked out for the best. People say, well, what's the big deal about, why interim? Really, the only thing that does is it will give that winner of the Fortuna Campbell fight a belt to hang on their mantle or in their trophy case. But also what it does is when it comes time to fight Devin Haney in the mandatory bout, it basically gives them a little bit more on the percentage if the fight goes to a purse bid. So it gives them a little more money, a little more leverage.
On that subject, do you, because there's some questions come in as regards from your tweet, on sums in my head, Ross says, do you think the real mistake the WBC boxing made was inserting Vasyl Lomachenko as mandatory and then elevating him without needing to making a defense, elevating to the emeritus
Franchise champion.
Franchise, sorry. It used to be emeritus, the franchise champion.
No, they actually, believe it or not, they still have an emeritus champion if necessary. And they have their in recess, which they had given the tag to Devin, which they no longer needed. And they also made this thing for a franchise, which they've given to Canelo Alvarez and also gave to Lomachenko.
Yeah.
I think it was a mistake to make Lomachenko the WBC mandatory challenger when he held belts from other organizations. I feel like that was a way that Mauricio, and you and I, Gareth, have talked to Mauricio about these issues many times. I think that in Mauricio, it's twofold. One, he wants to see the best and biggest fights for the WBC to be involved with. And, for boxing, but he liked, obviously, for the WBC to be involved. So by clearing the way for another organization champion to fight for their belt, that was good for the WBC, but it was also good for boxing. It wasn't the first time he ever did that. You may remember a few years ago, and this is just one example. I know there have been others. The WBC allowed Sergey Kovalev to be the WBC's mandatory for their light heavyweight title at a time when Adonis Stevenson was the champion in that organization, and Kovalev held a belt or maybe two belts or whatever in another organization, because that was a big fight and they were trying to help facilitate it, which would be good for boxing, but obviously also good for the WBC. Now that fight never came to pass for a variety of reasons, but I like the fact that the WBC is willing to put those champions from other organizations in that position to help facilitate these bigger fights. So I don't think that was a mistake. Now, Mauricio and I think you've been there when we've argued about it and had our debate. Mauricio has become a friend. I respect him a lot. And we just don't agree on certain things. And him and I have a very open line of communication about the things that we don't agree about. I don't agree on the franchise situation, why they created that, because frankly, if you're a boxing champion and you lose your fight, your title should transfer to the guy that beats you. The franchise champion, when they announced it, was specifically stated it was basically honorary. You can't lose that belt in the ring. So if Lomachenko or Canelo, for that matter, were to go in the ring and box against somebody and lose the fight, that person who beats them doesn't get the franchise title. So it's nice, I guess. You get an honorary title and they give you a piece of hardware, but it doesn't mean much.
It is. It's politics from Mauricio to keep himself relevant. We know that, but it's the Wild West. I mean, we had this conversation, and I can't repeat it because we were just talking about this very thing in Wolfgang Puck for about an hour at the Fury-Wilder fight. We had a long conversation. But you expressed your view. I wanted to grill Mauricio about it as well. And he does have his arguments. And on that note, Miles Carter's asking, is Billy Joe Saunders going to get the Canelo fight? Or will the COVID delay and DAZN's related financial problems mean we get GGG versus Canelo Part 3? I'll give my answer on that. I think they'll move with alacrity to make that trilogy fight when we come back.
You might be right about that. I think it's easier said than done because, I think, though, there may be a way to convince them that let Canelo fight Golovkin, and after that fight, then he can go to that Saunders level fight and Golovkin go to that Zermenta level fight. In other words, you're not going to mess up their money. You're just going to do it in a different order of bouts. So I think it's possible. The one caveat I throw out there, Gareth, is that we're not sure of Billy Joe Saunders' status because unrelated to Canelo, DAZN, whether they fight a third time between him and Triple G again, is he faces a certain punishment by the British board for some of that video that he made that was so repugnant, frankly, and offended a lot of people. So, until the British board does what it's going to do, we're not sure. If they give him a long suspension, then obviously the fight won't happen next. If it's a slap on the wrist, it's possible they still may go through with that.
I've got a feeling, though, that the longer the lockdown happens, the longer there aren't events, the more that these very big fights will be made very quickly with alacrity by promoters, because the whole sports landscape, everyone will be back celebrating. Everyone will be with their six packs, having beers, having barbecues, inviting people around, wanting to watch major sporting events. And that brings me to another point. Bob Arum made a point in the last 24 hours that there's no guarantee right now that Fury-Wilder trilogy, the Fury-Wilder 3 fight, will be the next fight for Tyson Fury, because there's all this talk from lockdown, from quarantine, from Anthony Joshua, even from Tyson Fury today, that we really need to get this undisputed fight on. And if they can give Wilder step-aside money, if the biceps injury is still precluding him from fighting, if Kubrat Pulev wants to take step-aside money, it would not surprise me in the least, Dan, to see one of the very big fights at the end of the year, or even early next year, maybe February, be Fury against Anthony Joshua.
I mean, I hope that happens, but It won't be the first time, but you and I will have to agree to disagree, because when you went through your litany of reasons and thoughts about that possibility, there was a lot of ifs in there.
Yeah.
Just one of those ifs can mess that up big time. Personally, I don't see Deontay Wilder wanting to step aside. I suppose anything is possible depending on how many zeros they put at the end of that, that paycheck for him to do so. But I don't think that they're going to do that. They'd also have to pay a substantial amount of money to get Kubrat Pulev to step aside, who's in that mandatory position, who has a signed contract apparently to do the fight. It was scheduled for late June in London. I don't see their team stepping aside. And I talk to their team on a regular basis also. So, there's a lot of ifs to take place. And the other big thing as it relates to that fight, and it's also a same reason why there may be people that don't think that the third fight between Canelo and Golovkin happens next, in the end of the year also. And it's the same exact reason. It's one thing to do Luke Campbell, Javier Fortuna behind closed doors. That's a fight that the gate it's important for the number of dollars or pounds that they generate in ticket sales, right? But not that big. Alvarez, when he fought Triple G the first time, the gate was $27 million. The second time was $24 million. When Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder had the fight back in February, which, by the way, Gareth, seems about 10 lifetimes ago at this point.
Yeah.
The live gate there set the all-time record for heavyweight in a heavyweight fight in Nevada, over $17 million. You can't just say, now let's do this third fight and not have that aspect of the revenue in your overall money. Now, is Deontay Wilder willing, or is Tyson Fury willing to take dramatically less money? Possibly. Now, let's say they somehow work out a deal where they can do Fury versus Anthony Joshua for the undisputed title. Again, that's a fight that draws a sellout crowd in any stadium in Britain, in most arenas, and that would sell out in Las Vegas, even though neither fighter is American. It would sell out in Madison Square Garden or Barclays Center. Pick a place that sells out. So unless you can figure out a way to make up for that massive amount of lost revenue, I just don't see that happening. Now, maybe some exotic location, take Saudi Arabia, they decide they'll have them back for another $100 million or whatever. I mean, anything is possible. But also, and I'm not saying they wouldn't do that, if you're Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury, two fighters who live for their crowds and their fans, I just don't see them having that enthusiasm to fight in front of nobody. I've talked to a lot of fighters, Gareth, over the last few weeks since this has been going on, and asked that question. Most fighters are very, disinterested in fighting if there's no fans there. Now, of course, that may change.
I get that. I get it.
But so it's such an open-ended question right now. I just don't see that. I don't see those things happening. I just don't think Fury Wilder 3 or Fury Wilder 3 is gonna. It probably would be the next fight before a Joshua fight. It seems to me.
Well, and also there's this talk about Vegas coming back very quickly. If a Vegas fight comes back, say in August, September, are you there or not?
Well, I mean, we'll see if I've got an outlet that wants to pay me to be there. Number one.
There will
Number
be.
two.
There will be.
Number two, also, and this is important. What is the status of the virus situation? What are the medical professionals saying as far as being there in terms of crowds and that sort of thing? You have to see what they say, and then you have to make a determination whether you want to make that trip. You have to travel. I mean, you'd be flying for many hours across the ocean and into Las Vegas. I have, for me, it's a 5.5 hour flight from Washington, D.C. to Las Vegas. Do I want to do that? I have a wife and a son at home. You want to put them at risk? So you have to weigh a lot of different factors. And again, I think that falls into the same category. Are the fans going to make the trip for that? And of course, you have to see if media is going to make those types of trips also. It's so open-ended. Who knows?
It really is, and it's so weird.
Yeah, are you going to make that long trip to go to Vegas for one of those kinds of fights?
It would depend on how I've tested for COVID, how my health is. I've had heart procedures in the last 5 months. I've had 2 of them.
By the way,
so
that says because they say that those folks with any kind of underlying medical condition would be more at risk. So it seems to me if you've had 2 heart procedures, you would be at least more at risk than somebody that has been healthy and not had any kind of procedure.
Exactly.
So,
but then this thing is so indeterminate that when I get tested eventually, I may have had it already. It's so strange, the whole thing. It's like there's no answers. I mean, one of the things I am getting a little bit fed up of at the moment, it's a bit of my bugbear. There's so many fucking experts out there telling us what we should be doing and how we should be well and this, that, and the other. And so many experts about the virus, frankly. Look, one other thing on the WBC. We mentioned Mauricio just now, Sulaiman. He revealed a few days ago, just a couple of days ago, that Dillian Whyte's mandatory period is 276 days, not 906, as Whyte's people and Whyte have been putting out. That one, what do you make of that? But also, Jordan Watson is asking, do you think Fury will retire before Whyte gets a chance to fight for the WBC title?
Well, I'll take the second question first. I know, and you know, and you're a lot closer to Tyson Fury than I am. He has been talking about, for a while now, that he only had X number of fights left. I think he wanted to have the fight he just had with Deontay, have the third fight that Deontay was entitled to contractually, and then fight Anthony Joshua, and then call it a day.
Perfect way to walk away if he wins all of those, isn't it? It's the perfect.
And frankly, even if he were to lose, he's got nothing to be ashamed of if he were to walk away like that. Obviously, but you and I have been around fighters a long time, and even if you take Tyson Fury at his word, and I'll say, in his heart, in his mind right now, he probably believes that. But a year and a half from now, or whenever things get going back to normal as far as those fights taking place, it's not unreasonable to think that he would change his mind. Lots of fighters have done that. We've all covered a whole slew of guys that have probably meant it in their heart that they're going to retire and then had a change of heart and come back. It happens all the time. It's rare that a guy announces a retirement, especially at that elite level, and sticks to it. Calzaghe has done it. I don't think he's coming back. Lennox Lewis has done it. Vitali Klitschko did it. So far, Vladimir Klitschko has done it. Bernard Hopkins, when he walked away, granted he was 52. But the point is, people still even now question if Floyd Mayweather will come back. Oscar De La Hoya never came back, but plenty of guys have retired and come out of retirement. So I think that Tyson Fury is going to be boxing longer than just the next two fights. And at that point, if Dillian Whyte is still in position and still, a top heavyweight, I don't see why that fight couldn't happen. It would be a very big fight in the UK for sure. They certainly could talk it up, and frankly, it's probably a pretty good fight in the ring, because when is the last time you saw Dillian Whyte in a fight that wasn't at least entertaining?
Exactly. I completely agree. And I think it would be a very entertaining fight because he always brings it.
By the way, as far as that first part though goes, as far as the mandatory, look, the WBC, they have not really treated Dillian Whyte the way he should have been treated, to me, in terms of ordering mandatory fights, giving him the opportunity. He didn't help himself with that drug situation. I know it was litigated in terms of their investigation, but there are people that still have questions about that. So I just look at it like this. He is the WBC's interim champion. Hopefully he can get a chance to make that defense that he had coming up. And after that, get another big fight if he wins.
You mentioned Vitali and Vladimir there, or particularly Vladimir. I had the privilege of an interview with Vitali, who's now the mayor of Kiev. Very, very great, upstanding men. Both of them, as we both know. We've both known them, I'd like to say 15 years we've known them, maybe longer, When was the Prince Nassim Marco Antonio Barrera fight? What year was 2001, I think.
So that was the first time I met the brothers in person.
Yeah.
Got to know them a bit. So I've known them since then, and always been, in good stead with them. They're great guys, like you said. They're real men. I know Vladimir much better on a personal level than I know Vitali, but they're both great guys. And I read your story in the Telegraph about what Vitali did in terms of with the COVID-19 and getting supplies and helping Kiev and Ukraine keep their rates very low compared to other countries out there. And he was a big part of that.
It's an extraordinary story. I was very privileged to get hold of him. I had a little tip-off. Made my ears prick up, and it would have been the same for you, that Kiev, of which he is the mayor and has been there for 6 years, and he stood up to Putin all those years ago, President Putin, when the Russians were being aggressive about the Crimean Peninsula. There were pictures of him standing head and shoulders, as he does, above other people, and he's an 18-stone, 6'7" man, let's not forget. My ears pricked up when I learned that Kiev was twinned with Wuhan as a twin city. And then I looked at the figures of deaths, which at the time were like 13 in Kiev, in a city of nearly 3 million people. So I reached out to his press team and got an interview with him. His English, as you know, isn't brilliant, but they sent me very fulsome answers back. He set up a task force in January. He jumped on it straight away. He listened to mayors of other cities. He bought equipment. He bought ventilators, breathing and ventilation equipment.
It's called being a leader.
There you go.
And they're fortunate to have somebody like him in that position.
I agree. I mean, I was so pleased with the story, not just from my perspective, but to be able to put his story out, because he's from our industry. Him and Vladimir are both gentlemen pugilists, raised in the right way. And I really do think the leadership this man has shown, Vitali Klitschko, will propel him one day to being president of Ukraine.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Would not surprise me at all. You know, I know I've talked to Vladimir about that, asked him, did he ever have any interest in following in his brother's footsteps into politics? And certainly he followed his brother's footsteps into boxing. His view was that he's very proud of what his brother has done. He himself does not have interest in pursuing politics, but is there to support the brother and certainly to support the causes that he believes in with his foundation and on a charitable basis. But, you know, the brother of Vitali has done an extraordinary job, it seems to me, just looking from the outside.
No, absolutely he has. It's an incredible thing. I do hope he gets a lot of credit for it as time goes on. Very quick answer to this one, but the questions are really starting to roll in now.
Good. Let's do it.
Yeah, very quick.
Take a drink while I'm listening to your question.
To these two. Who do you think will be the next opponent for Luis Ortiz and Masayoshi Nakatani? I thought Nakatani looked good against Lopez.
As far as an opponent for Nakatani, I have no idea because I'm not sure if he plans to still continue to fight in Japan where everything is locked down anyway. But he did have a good performance against Lopez, even though he lost. In terms of Luis Ortiz, look, he may have met his match in Deontay Wilder 2 times, but he's still a heavyweight that you'd want to watch. He's still a heavyweight with a certain pedigree. And there have been at least murmurs, rumors, discussion, however you want to phrase it, on the PB side, who have other heavyweights about possibly him fighting other heavyweights. You know, I think one of them was maybe Dominic Breazeale, or possibly, an Adam Konacki or Chris Arreola, somebody like that, you know, when he returns to the ring. But I have no doubt
Dillian Whyte.
Well, he's not a PBC fighter, but that would be a good fight for sure.
Really?
You know, Dillian Whyte has never been one to shrug a challenge off. He's fought a lot of quality guys, considering they haven't been championship fights. But I think that Luis Ortiz will definitely get something that's notable because he fights under a banner that has, you know, a good amount of heavyweights, and he's a named heavyweight.
Tony Smith _75 asks, I'll answer this first. Who wins, Devin Haney or Ryan Garcia? Can't
wait to hear this answer.
And well, I'm not sure if he means Mikey Garcia or Ryan Garcia, actually.
I'm pretty sure he means Ryan because Mikey's fighting at welterweight and Ryan is in his weight class at lightweight. And
yeah, but Mikey could still make lightweight, I'm sure.
Trust me, he's talking about Ryan.
Okay, I know. But Mikey Garcia beats Devin Haney, I'm afraid. But Ryan Garcia, wow, that's a really big question. And you know what? It's really hard to answer, isn't it? They're both brilliant. I think Ryan Garcia is the more straightforward guy to set a plan for, and Haney is a little more slippery. So I would say on that basis, Haney just slides to victory by the slimmest of margins.
I think that's a dynamite fight, and it's a fight that could be very big. Lightweight division right now, and I don't know how long these guys can stay in that weight class, is very blessed to have 4 really superstar level younger fighters in their early to mid 20s who have already made names for themselves and can really make a round robin if they can put the politics and all that business aside and we can get back to boxing. I'm talking about Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia, Teofimo Lopez, who also has one of the belts, and Gervonta Davis, who has one of the belts. I mean, all 4 of those guys can make a lot of noise. Now, I did an interview with Ryan a few days ago where he basically talked about those other guys and, you know, had said he was not impressed by those guys who have some of them have slagged him a little bit in terms of his competition. But if you look at the opponents that he has faced, Ryan, in his last 3 or 4 fights, he's fought just as good opponents as any of those other guys. And you could even make the argument that maybe slightly better. Teofimo has a great win, relatively speaking, against Richard Comey, who he blew away in 2 rounds to get the IBF belt.
Extraordinary that was, wasn't it? Extraordinary.
Really, really good performance.
Yeah.
As a lightweight, Gervonta Davis has only boxed there, you know, officially just the one time against Gamboa. He won. but it was a struggle with a guy that we found out after the fact had a torn Achilles. So you can't take away the victory, but maybe it shouldn't have been as difficult, maybe. But not to, but Gervonta at 130 was very explosive and looked good. And Devin Haney is a tremendously skillful and top quality up and coming fighter with a great record and a great work ethic and all that. But his resume of victories, let's just be honest, is not very impressive. He's getting the accolades he gets more from the eye test, which is important. Whereas at the moment, Garcia is probably getting the accolades from the eye test in addition to some of the actual wins. Yeah. I don't think that fight happens anytime soon. I would love to see it. And to me, it's flip a coin because they both can box. They both have various things that they're excellent at. They both have punching power. Ryan probably has a little more punching power. Haney's probably a little bit better of a boxer. To me, if I could make a match in boxing, that might be one of the best ones I would pick of the non, Wilder versus Joshua.
Or Teofimo against Vasil or
Lomachenko, exactly. Of the non fights of that level, that would be just a great fight.
I'd like these two to fight a lightweight and light welterweight or super, whatever it's called these days, super lightweight. Look, final thing, and I'm going to try and bring a little bit of fantasy into reality. And one of your
this is all fantasy because nothing's happening.
No, exactly. One of your big mates, David Haye, who's totally into you, of course.
We're good buds now. We're back. We're good.
I know you are, but you still made probably more puns, which you shouldn't have done.
Oh, before you go any further, I want the people to know that I forget what fight it was. It was not, I think it was when Amir Khan fought Terrence Crawford about a year ago or so, and David was at the Garden. It might have been a different fight, but David
I was there when you two got together. I was there.
Okay. So everybody knows that David Haye and I have not exactly been the best of buds through the years. We had a nice conversation that night. We hugged it out. It's all good. I respect David. He did what he did. I'm happy he had a great career. Certainly as a cruiserweight, made a lot of money. And I think he's a pretty good guy, whatever it may have been. And now let's hear your fantasy fight.
He still told me, though, he's going to give you a body shot when you're not looking one day.
That's okay. I'll give it right back.
Well, it involves David Haye, okay?
Okay.
Just three fancy things. So, Haye, and this really is totally fantastic, has said in the last few hours that he would come back to face the winner of Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua. Lol, lol, lol. No, he can't. He can't. But
he was supposed to fight Fury twice, and it was
exactly. So, obviously he's seeing the dollar signs because it would still be very big. But David's body is shot to bits, and he's approaching 40 now. Remember, so would Haye have beaten Deontay Wilder?
No, in my opinion, and I'm not trying to knock David Haye. Deontay Wilder as we all know, is a fearsome puncher, and he, the style that Tyson Fury was able to employ in the second fight obviously got to him as well as in the first fight, even though it turned out to be a draw. Whoever you thought was the winner. Keep in mind though that David Haye is much smaller. David Haye is not the caliber of boxer of a Tyson Fury. Doesn't have that kind of nimbleness with his feet and that sort of thing. And I just think it would have been a bad matchup style-wise for David Haye, and that Deontay Wilder probably at some point lands the right hand and knocks him out. Remember, Klitschko dropped him, much bigger man. David had been stopped as a cruiserweight. Granted it was years ago. It happens. A long time ago in a hell of a fight. So no, my pick would be Deontay Wilder. It's not a knock on Haye. I just think that Wilder style-wise matches up much better with Haye than Haye would with Wilder, and it's a real tough night for him. And by the way, I would probably pick Tyson Fury against David Haye also for different reasons.
Well, that's the next question. So I think it would have been exciting while it lasted, David Haye and Deontay Wilder. But the revelation was when David was working on the Fury-Wilder fights, he said he sparred so many rounds with him and he couldn't dent him. And that was the reason why he didn't pick Fury to beat Wilder. So on that note, those two delayed fights that never happened, and Fury and his family, and I, funnily enough, got Paris Fury on my radio show with David Haye in Vegas in February, and she was like, your name's come up a lot in our house. She was lovely. As you know, as you've explained, the enmities that we have in our industry. I mean, Joe Calzaghe talked to me about Bernard Hopkins the other day. Like, the enmities become friendships in the end, you know?
They do. I mean, that Marco Antonio Barrera and Eric Morales,
There you go.
rivals you could ever imagine in the boxing ring, who hated each other worse than death outside the ring. 15 years later, they're friendly with each other. I saw one of them posted on one of their social medias, and it was the two of them and their wives having dinner together. And they cared for those 3 fights with each other, and they respect each other after that. Sometimes it doesn't take that long. Mickey Ward and Arturo Gatti were, you know, by the time their first fight or second fight promotion was going on, they'd become friends. By the time their third fight was over, they were literally best friends. So that happens. But yes, many of the most terrible enemies in their careers do become at least friendly. Look, Lennox Lewis, Evander Holyfield, and Mike Tyson all had fierce rivalries, all three of them with each other, particularly Holyfield and Tyson. And now they're friendly with each other. They may not go, you know, Riddick Bowe and Evander Holyfield are literally like the closest of friends. They hang out with each other all the time. So, you know, I like to see that stuff. I love to see put on these great battles and have so much respect for each other when it's over.
Yeah.
Even if it's years later and they become friends with each other.
Exactly. So prime Haye and a prime Fury, who would have won?
I mean, I still have to go with Tyson Fury. The combination of the skills and the size, that's a hard thing to overcome.
Because he's always stepped up. I mean, the 2013 David Haye and Tyson Fury might have been a completely different fight as well, you know?
When David first got to heavyweight, he still fought in that fierce manner like he did when he had come up from cruiserweight. Stalking. Yeah, and coming right to you and throwing, you know, good straight punches and whatever. His body didn't have as many issues in terms of the injuries that he has suffered over the years to, like, I can't even keep track of all the things that he had injured, shoulders and ankles and knees or whatever it was. That David Haye probably would have had a little bit of a better chance. And I know I was obviously at the time when they were scheduled to fight 2 times, I was disappointed that it didn't happen. You know, now all we can do is just talk about what we think might would have happened. Unless he comes back.
Exactly. He won't come back. He cannot. That's totally wrong.
Totally.
Would Deontay Wilder have beaten Vladimir Klitschko? And I'm gonna answer this first. Even though Vladimir was defensively minded and Manny Stewart used to get incensed by his inability to see the kill, if you like, to see the killing time, the moment to go for it, and would be screaming him. You've been there, I'm sure. When he's screaming in the corner at Vladimir.
He did the same thing to Lennox.
You know? I think Vladimir, if he was mentally tough, would have been too much for Deontay Wilder and would have got to him. But then again, there's always that danger of the right hand from Deontay. So I think Klitschko wears him down and just gets a points decision.
I can see that 100%. As far as the mental aspect, whatever so-called weaknesses that were perceived in Vladimir, let's say with the Lehman-Brewster loss, those were erased in my mind. Remember, the Lehman-Brewster fight was his first fight with Emmanuel Stewart. The second fight, you know, and then onward, you know, they were good together, obviously. I always figured, in the way I looked at it, was Emmanuel not only a great X's and O's trainer, all the great things you could say. To me, his greatest attribute was as a psychologist.
Completely.
I had conversations with Emmanuel about that before he passed. I remember talking over the years with Lennox about that sort of thing. I have talked to Vladimir about that over the years. And I think that, you know, his so-called lack of mental preparedness is overrated by some people. Vladimir Klitschko is an extraordinarily very, very, very well-focused, very mentally in tune, and really can handle as much as anybody. Remember, you can't spend literally almost 10 years as the heavyweight champion of the world if you're not mentally strong. Because every single time someone's coming for what you have. And he went through, you know, 18 consecutive successful title defenses, you know, the third most in the history of boxing. Vladimir Klitschko appeared in 29 heavyweight world title fights. That is more than any other person who ever walked the earth. So any notion that he's not mentally strong to me is just misguided.
Well, it's ludicrous, really, when you think about it, isn't it? It's absolutely ludicrous.
Now, he doubted himself at times early. He did suffer losses, but he was able to overcome that and come back from that, which is even more mentally strong in my view. So anyway, the point it was, you know, mental, physical, however you want to look at it, I think that all due respect to Deontay Wilder, that Vladimir Klitschko would have beaten him. Now people will say, oh, Rafael, you know, he's just a Vladimir Klitschko, you know, fanboy or whatever. Well, you say whatever you want, but that's my opinion.
Listen, I'm a fan of his, you know, generically. He's been brilliant with us over the years, and he's still a brilliant man. Dan, final question. I'm always going to ask you this at the end of our little interviews.
Okay.
What's for dinner tonight?
That's a good question. I haven't the foggiest idea. That's my wife's department. She's in charge.
Okay, well, I've already had...
How about you?
I've had pork chops and a Savoy cabbage and panned potatoes cut thin and cooked in the oven. I had a tiny little bite of it because it's 6:18 before we started today, and I'm going to go back and finish it now.
That sounds pretty good. I have to say this, though, one thing, since we're all hunkered down, locked in, there's been a lot, and my wife's a pretty good cook, so she's been doing much more of it, obviously, because we're here. So thankfully, not only does she do it very well, but she enjoys it. So me, my son, my wife, it's been good. You get the grocery delivery or the grocery pickup. You don't have to go in, and you know, you make do.
Well, listen, have a good weekend. I'll put this up on YouTube, because let's catch up on Monday now. And
that sounds good.
Let's keep it rocking and rolling.
Sounds good, my man. Good
Great to see you, my brother. Cheers, D-Love. Cheers.
Take care. All good.